Genghis Khan and his family and
Oh,
what
cool.
they did. Dude, they killed 10% of the population of Earth while he was alive. They killed so many
What?
people that they affected the carbon footprint of human beings on Earth.
Joe Rogan has always had a knack for diving into topics that sit right on the edge of mystery, history, and speculation. But when news broke of the alleged discovery of Genghis Khan's tomb, even Rogan was left momentarily speechless. For decades, the final resting place of the infamous Mongol conqueror has eluded archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters alike. The man who once commanded the largest contiguous land empire in human history vanished from the world with no confirmed grave. And now, the idea that this enigma might finally be solved was enough to stop Rogan mid-conversation during a recent podcast episode. The conversation began like many others. Joe was deep in dialogue with an expert in ancient civilizations, casually exploring stories about lost cities and forgotten kings. But once his guest dropped the phrase, confirmed satellite data over a region in Kentai province shows what might be Genghis Khan's tomb, Joe leaned back in his chair and raised an eyebrow. His voice shifted from curious to captivated. He asked what everyone wanted to know, "Are you saying we've actually found it?" To understand the magnitude of this moment, you have to understand who Genghis Khan was. Born in 1162 as Temujin, he rose from tribal obscurity to become one of the most feared and respected military strategists in history. By the time of his death in 1227, Genghis Khan had conquered swathes of Asia and Eastern Europe, leaving behind a legacy both revered and reviled. But despite his impact, his burial site remained a mystery for 800 years. That wasn't just a coincidence, it was by design. Legend says the funeral procession killed anyone they passed to keep the secret. The soldiers who buried him rode horses over the grave to erase all traces. Streams were diverted to conceal the location. Then, those responsible for the burial were executed. It was secrecy wrapped in paranoia. Over the centuries, countless expeditions tried to uncover the tomb. From Soviet archaeologists in the early 20th century to modern tech-backed explorers using satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar, many tried and all failed. That's what makes this recent discovery so astonishing. Joe's guest revealed that a private research team, using advanced LiDAR mapping, noticed an unnatural formation in the remote mountains of eastern Mongolia. Buried beneath centuries of earth, vegetation, and collapsed stonework appeared to be a large, symmetrical structure with subterranean chambers. The architecture, depth, and design pointed toward a royal burial ground. Joe Rogan was floored. He paused, looked around the studio, and said, "Do you realize what that would mean? We're talking about the grave of a man whose DNA is in an estimated 16 million people alive today. That's not just some old bones. That's a direct line to one of the most impactful lives ever lived." As the conversation unfolded, they discussed the ramifications. First, there's the cultural significance. For Mongolians, Genghis Khan isn't just a conqueror, he's a national hero. His tomb isn't just a historical relic, it's a sacred site. If the discovery is confirmed, how should it be treated? With reverence? As a museum? Should it be excavated at all? Rogan acknowledged this delicate balance. He mentioned how the Egyptian government has often wrestled with the same dilemma over pharaohs' tombs, between honoring the past and educating the future. Then there's the potential treasure. If this is truly Genghis Khan's tomb, it might contain artifacts of unimaginable value, items looted from across Asia, ancient manuscripts, weapons, gold, even early maps of the known world. But Rogan, ever the pragmatist, pointed out the darker side. If that tomb is loaded with gold and relics, there's going to be a race. Not just between archaeologists and historians, but governments, black market collectors, and probably even looters. It's going to be a mess. Joe also speculated on the possible impact on our understanding of history. What if there are scrolls buried with Genghis Khan that rewrite parts of the Mongol narrative? What if his tomb includes writings that show a more philosophical or even spiritual side to him? Historians have long debated whether Genghis was merely a ruthless warlord or a visionary uniting the East under law and trade. The artifacts in his tomb might tip the scale. What captivated Joe the most, however, was the mystery. For him, this wasn't just about bones in a box. It was about the allure of something that's been hidden for centuries. We live in a world where you can look up almost anything on Google. The fact that something like this, something this huge, has stayed secret for 800 years, that's wild. It's like nature and history work together to keep the mystery alive. He also brought up how this discovery ties into our relationship with the past. In a world obsessed with the future, AI, space travel, genetic engineering, something about finding Genghis Khan's tomb yanks us right back into the roots of human power, ambition, and mortality. You can conquer half the world, Joe said, but in the end, you still end up in a hole in the ground. There's something poetic about that. The conversation took an even more speculative turn when Joe asked about the possibility of DNA extraction. Imagine if they find his remains and sequence his genome, he mused. Would that change how we understand the spread of genetics across Eurasia? Could it unlock something about why his bloodline was so prolific? His guest nodded and mentioned the controversial idea that some people believe Genghis Khan's lineage might carry rare genetic traits, enhanced immune responses, increased fertility, maybe even behavioral predispositions toward leadership or aggression. It was wild speculation, but exactly the kind of thing Joe's audience eats up. Then came the part that sent a chill down everyone's spine. Joe asked, "What if there's a curse?" He referenced how many ancient tombs, especially in Egypt and China, are said to have been protected by curses to ward off intruders. Stories of mysterious deaths, strange illnesses, or catastrophic misfortunes often followed excavations. The guest laughed but didn't dismiss it entirely. Every great tomb has its myth. And if Genghis Khan's tomb is real, the myths will grow overnight. Rogan paused again, almost as if the weight of the moment caught up with him. We could be looking at one of the biggest archaeological discoveries of all time. Bigger than Tutankhamun. Bigger than the Terracotta Army. This is the final chapter in a story that's shaped continents. And it's just beginning to unfold. He also speculated about the geopolitical consequences. The tomb is reportedly located in a very remote region of Mongolia, but that hasn't stopped whispers of interest from powerful nations. If this becomes an international excavation, who gets to control it? Mongolia? UNESCO? Would China want to say, considering the historical overlap during the Yuan dynasty? Joe suggested that what happens next might not be decided by archaeologists but by diplomats. As they wrapped up the conversation, Joe couldn't help but go back to the human side of the story. Just imagine, he said, somewhere out there, a group of researchers looked at a bunch of oddly shaped hills, ran a scan, and might have just uncovered the final resting place of the most legendary conqueror in history. That's not just archaeology, that's a damn movie plot. Joe's guest then delved deeper into how the discovery might impact Mongolia itself. The country has long revered Genghis Khan not just as a founder of the Mongol Empire, but as a symbol of national identity and unity. His name is on currency, airports, monuments, and even vodka bottles. But his absence, his missing tomb, has always been part of the mystique. With this discovery, Mongolia might find itself at the center of global attention, with tourists, historians, and media outlets flooding in. Joe imagined a scenario where the remote Kentai Mountains become the next World Heritage hotspot, possibly turning a quiet, sacred region into a bustling tourist zone. That led to a discussion about how local Mongolian tribes might react. Many nomadic clans still practice traditional ways of life and hold deep spiritual connections to the land. If the tomb is where they suspect, it may lie in an area considered holy or off-limits. There could be protests, legal challenges, or spiritual resistance to any form of excavation. Joe pointed out how modern science often runs headfirst into ancient traditions, and how it's crucial to approach such discoveries with respect. He said, "You can't just roll in with a bulldozer and a drone. This isn't just about data, it's about people's beliefs." The guest agreed and added that any excavation would likely take years, possibly decades, especially if the site proves as complex as initial scans suggest. Multiple burial chambers, subterranean tunnels, traps to deter grave robbers. All of this has been theorized in ancient Mongol funeral practices. Joe speculated that the tomb might contain not only Genghis Khan but also his closest generals, family members, or even entire sections of his royal court entombed alongside him. That kind of architectural scale wouldn't be simple to uncover. Joe's mind began racing again with questions about the construction of the tomb itself. How did they even build it? He asked. If they really diverted rivers and crushed the ground flat with horses, that's insane engineering. And how did no one stumble on it all this time? Not a single artifact, not one piece of gold, not one cracked urn. His guest explained that Mongolia's remoteness, rugged terrain, and sparse population all played a role. That, combined with centuries of oral tradition discouraging people from looking, kept the area untouched. But now that satellite imaging has advanced, and algorithms can detect anomalies in land formations, these secrets are harder to keep buried. It's no longer just about physically digging, now it's about reading the Earth from space. The team that reportedly found the site did so not with shovels but with software. AI-enhanced topography and high-resolution data patterns spotted alignments that looked unnatural, rectangular voids beneath forested hills. Joe was amazed that artificial intelligence might be what finally solved one of the oldest mysteries of human history. The podcast then shifted to wild speculation, classic Rogan territory. Okay, but what if there's something in there they didn't expect? What if it's not just a tomb? What if it's something else? He asked. The idea of a deeper secret, a library, a cache of forbidden knowledge, or even ancient weapons, sent the conversation into overdrive. Joe compared it to stories from other cultures, where rulers were buried with technologies or texts that the world wasn't ready for. Maybe Genghis knew something we didn't, Joe said. Maybe this is the kind of discovery that changes our entire view of ancient civilizations. The idea of lost knowledge struck a chord. Joe and his guest discussed how empires rise and fall, and how knowledge is often the first casualty. What if inside that tomb are scrolls or inscriptions describing Mongol strategy, early contact with other cultures, or accounts of ancient conflicts never recorded in modern texts? Joe even mused about the possibility of long-lost languages, symbols or texts that we haven't deciphered yet, possibly revealing alliances or events unknown to current historians. Then the conversation turned to ethics. Should the tomb be opened at all? Some believe the tomb was meant to remain hidden forever and that disturbing it would violate the will of Genghis Khan and his descendants. Joe brought up examples like the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, where tombs were opened with the best of intentions but led to cultural backlash and debates over who owns the past. Should Mongolia alone have the right to decide what happens to the tomb? Or should it be handled by a global coalition of historians and scientists? Joe wasn't sure. This is one of those rare moments where history, politics, science, and spirituality all collide. He also pointed out the irony in how obsessed we are with death. We study people's lives, but we're always more fascinated by their tombs, he said. Like with the Titanic, we don't just care how it sank, we want to see the wreck. Same with Tutankhamun. Now it's Genghis. We want to be close to the moment when history turned into legend. His guest responded by saying maybe it's because tombs are time capsules. They freeze a moment in time. They're built with the intention of being found someday, or of never being found at all. And when they are uncovered, it's like opening a message sent across centuries. Joe nodded, contemplating the weight of that idea. Maybe that's the pull, he said. It's not just about the guy. It's about what he left behind. A message, a warning, a story. Something that waited 800 years for someone to listen. As the episode neared its end, Joe summarized the emotional and intellectual journey they'd been on. The idea that the world might finally know where Genghis Khan is buried felt both exciting and a little terrifying. It raised questions about who we are, what we value, and how much of the past we're ready to confront. It's the ultimate mystery, he said, and we might be standing right at the edge of solving it. He ended the conversation with a line that sent chills through listeners. Somewhere, under a quiet hill in Mongolia, the bones of the world's greatest conqueror may be lying in the dark. And now, the world is listening again. That's when Joe leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and said what everyone else was thinking. I don't know if I want them to open it or leave it buried forever. Either way, it's one hell of a story.